The slap echoed through the courtyard like a gunshot, sharp, cruel, final. For a moment, everything stood still. The laughter of kids on swings halted midair. Conversations at picnic tables froze. My daughter, Ava, stood stunned, her tiny frame trembling, one hand still clutching her purple walker, while the other gently cradled the side of her face, already reddening. She didn't cry. Not yet. Not because it didn't hurt, but because she was too shocked to believe it had actually happened. Karen stood towering over her, eyes blazing with self-righteous fury, as if she had every right to strike a child. She talked back to me. She said loudly, like a judge delivering a sentence, not a woman who had just hit an 11-year-old girl with a neurological disorder. The words burned hotter than the slap itself. Around us, no one moved. Some looked away. Some stared. No one stepped forward. And in that paralyzing silence, one thought kept screaming inside my head. What kind of world lets this happen in plain sight and does nothing? Before that day, life in our little HOA-governed community actually felt like a blessing, a breath of fresh air after years of holding our breath. When I first moved into Glenridge Gardens, it felt like a quiet promise. A clean slate, a neighborhood with trimmed hedges, well-lit sidewalks, polite nods from strangers, and houses that looked like they belonged on the cover of real estate brochures. But for me, it was more than just a pretty place. It was a chance for my daughter, Ava, to finally live without the constant weight of being the girl with the walker. For once, I hoped she could just be a child. Ava was born with a neurological condition that affects her motor coordination and muscle control. She uses a mobility walker, not all the time, but often enough that it becomes the first thing people notice about her before they ever bother to learn her name. At our last place, there were stairs everywhere, broken elevators, narrow doorways, and worst of all, neighbors who sighed when they saw us coming. But Glenridge Gardens was different. Ramps were smooth. The sidewalks were wide. There was even a small park at the center with a ramped slide where Ava could play alongside other kids. She called it her magic street. I still remember the first day we moved in. The sun was golden, warm without being harsh. Ava wore her favorite yellow hoodie and clung to me nervously as we wheeled past curious neighbors. One woman even smiled and waved. Ava hesitated, looked up at me, and then, cautiously, like testing her balance, she lifted her hand and waved back. It might sound like nothing, but for me, that small moment felt like a crack in a wall we'd been trying to break through for years. It was the first time in a long while that Ava didn't hide behind me. The first time she didn't shrink into the shadows. The first time she believed maybe the world had a corner where she could belong. Over the following weeks, we settled in. I decorated Ava's room with glowing stars and soft blue curtains. She made friends with a little boy named Dylan from across the street who had a fascination with bugs and didn't care one bit about her walker. We found a rhythm. Morning walks to the mailbox, Ava's therapy appointments, Sunday baking days, with too much flour and not enough eggs. And the community, at least in those early weeks, felt warm. Kind. The HOA, of course, had its rules. Lawn heights, garbage bin timings, holiday decoration limits. But I figured that was normal. Tedious, maybe, but manageable. Karen, yes, that Karen, was the HOA vice president. Back then, I didn't know much about her. Just that she wore crisp beige blazers, even on Saturdays, and that her front lawn had exactly 7 flower pots, symmetrically placed. She'd wave, tight-lipped, when we passed by. Not warm, not rude, just there. Ava didn't notice her at first. She was too busy discovering her new freedom. She began walking the neighborhood loop with me in the evenings. Sometimes she'd pause to feel the wind in her hair or to pet someone's dog. She'd ask questions about the trees, the birds, why some houses had flags and some didn't. Normal questions. The kind you dream your child will ask when you're not busy worrying about their safety all the time. And slowly, we began to breathe again. I started to believe that maybe, just maybe, we had finally found the place where Ava could thrive. A community that saw her as more than her diagnosis. A place where she could laugh without stares, fall without judgment, and speak without fear. I didn't know then that peace, like glass, can shatter without warning. Because sometimes it's not the world outside that breaks you, it's the quiet evil hiding in plain sight. At first, Karen didn't seem like a threat. She was the kind of neighbor who kept to herself, the kind whose smile never reached her eyes. Always neat, always composed, always watching. There was something about the way she looked at us, me, specifically, that didn't sit right. I brushed it off as discomfort or unfamiliarity. Maybe she wasn't used to having a child like Ava in the neighborhood. Maybe she'd warm up in time. I told myself people needed space to adjust. The first hint of something deeper came during a neighborhood cleanup event. I was volunteering near the park while Ava sat on a bench, quietly sketching butterflies in her notebook. Karen walked by, her clipboard tucked under her arm like always. She paused, glanced at Ava, then said with a polite but sharp tone, "You might want to keep her out of the way." She almost got tripped over earlier. I blinked. "She's just sitting, Karen." Karen smiled, but it was that tight-lipped, condescending kind of smile. "Yes, well, you know how children can be, especially special ones." It took me a moment to process what she meant. I didn't respond, not because I didn't have words, but because I was afraid of how sharp they would come out. I didn't want to start anything, not over one ignorant comment. Not yet. Then came the passive-aggressive notes, folded pieces of paper taped to my door. "Please ensure your daughter's walker doesn't scratch the hallway paint." Or, "Noise levels after 6 p.m. are monitored. Loud TV can disturb other residents." Loud? It was Ava watching cartoons at normal volume. I began to wonder if anyone else was getting these messages. When I asked Dylan's mother, she looked puzzled. "No, never got anything like that," she said. One afternoon, Ava and I were walking back from the corner shop. She was moving slower that day. Her legs had been cramping more frequently, and we passed by Karen's perfectly manicured lawn. As we approached, Karen was watering her plants. Her eyes flicked down to Ava's walker and then back up to me. "She seems to be struggling a lot more lately," she said, in a voice coated with fake sympathy. "Are you sure this neighborhood is still right for her?" I froze. Ava, unaware of the venom behind the words, smiled and waved. Karen didn't wave back. Over the weeks, these small moments stacked like bricks, each one heavier than the last. Karen would appear whenever Ava played outside, arms crossed, watching. She'd whisper to other residents when we walked by. Once, Ava left her chalk drawings on the sidewalk, colorful butterflies, suns, and hearts, and the next morning they were gone. Scrubbed clean. A note was left in our mailbox. "Public walkways are not for personal use." I wanted to fight back. I wanted to confront her, but it all felt so carefully measured. Never enough to file a report. Never enough to call the HOA president and say, "Karen's bullying my daughter." They would have called it paranoia, oversensitivity. And maybe that's what she wanted, to make me second-guess every move, every word, every decision. Then came the rule change. One morning, the HOA sent out a new bulletin. For safety reasons, all children must be accompanied by an adult while on shared walkways. A strange rule, considering Glenridge Gardens was filled with kids who rode bikes and skateboards unsupervised every day. I asked around. No one else had heard of any complaints, no accidents, no injuries, but I knew exactly who had pushed for it. Ava didn't understand why she wasn't allowed to walk the block alone anymore. She had worked so hard in therapy to be able to go just one circle by herself. It gave her independence, pride, and now it was gone. She didn't complain, though. She just nodded and quietly said, "Okay." But I saw it in her eyes, that shrinking look, the same one she used to wear at our old apartment complex when kids would laugh at her in the elevator. The final straw before everything exploded happened a week before the slap. Ava had offered to help set up decorations for a community birthday party. She was tying balloons to a fence when one slipped from her hand and floated upward. She laughed, chasing it with slow, awkward steps, and bumped into Karen's table. A cup of punch spilled. No one was hurt. Nothing broke. But Karen reacted like she had been assaulted. "She is becoming a liability," she snapped, grabbing a towel. "I've told you before, she needs more supervision." She's a child, Karen, I said, already cleaning the mess. She's doing her best. Karen lowered her voice, leaning in close, so only I could hear her. Then maybe her best isn't good enough for this neighborhood. I clenched my fists, nails digging into my palms. Ava had frozen behind me, confused, blinking rapidly. I wanted to scream, to shove every table over and walk away. But I didn't. I smiled, a brittle, barely holding it together smile. We're not going anywhere, I said, and we didn't. But I should have known Karen wasn't done yet. The storm wasn't over. It hadn't even started. It was the first sunny Saturday of spring, the kind of day when the whole neighborhood comes out to shed the weight of winter. Kids on scooters zigzagged through the sidewalks, grills hissed with burgers and hot dogs, and a table near the center of the cul-de-sac was stacked with plastic cups, lemonade pitchers, and paper plates sagging under the weight of homemade brownies. Glenridge Gardens was hosting its annual HOA Unity Cookout, a name that now makes my skin crawl. The whole community had been invited. Even Karen. Ava had been excited about it all week. She picked out her favorite lavender dress with the little white daisies and asked me to braid her hair like I used to when she was smaller. Do you think Dylan will be there? She asked that morning, clutching the pink friendship bracelet she'd made for him. I told her I was sure he would, and even if he wasn't, there'd be other kids to meet, other people to see. Her smile in that moment was the kind that sticks in a parent's heart forever. We arrived a little after noon. Music was playing from someone's portable speaker, classic rock, loud enough to dance to. A few families were already spread out on lawn chairs and picnic blankets. The HOA board had set up a folding table with flyers, sign-up sheets, and a suggestion box. Karen, of course, stood behind it like she owned the place, wearing a stiff beige blouse and dark sunglasses that shielded any real emotion. Just her presence made my stomach knot. But I refused to let her ruin our day. Ava was excited. That's what mattered. She spotted Dylan near the swings and hurried toward him, her walker clicking gently on the pavement. I followed at a distance, giving her room to feel independent. They talked, laughed, and shared juice boxes while I grabbed a plate of food and chatted with another parent. It wasn't until later in the afternoon that it all came crashing down. Ava had volunteered, completely on her own, to help serve cupcakes at the dessert table. I stood nearby, amazed at how far she'd come. Just a year ago, she was terrified to speak to strangers. Now here she was, carefully handing out cupcakes and beaming every time someone said thank you. Even Karen was there, albeit reluctantly, organizing the flyers on the HOA table and mumbling to herself. Then a man walked up, one of the newer residents, I think his name was Mark, and asked where he could sign up for the neighborhood watch. Karen, distracted, waved him off and pointed toward the suggestion box. I think that one's just for ideas, not sign-ups, Ava said gently from the cupcake table, trying to help. Karen slowly turned toward her. What did you say? She asked sharply. Ava blinked, confused but calm. I was just saying I think that box is for suggestions. I saw the sign earlier. Karen's eyes narrowed behind her sunglasses. And who exactly asked you? The conversation around us didn't stop immediately, but the air shifted. People began to notice. Ava stood frozen, one hand gripping the edge of the cupcake table. I was just helping, she said softly. Karen took a step forward, now towering over her. You think you can talk back to me? In front of the entire community? Her voice was louder now, cutting through the ambient music and chatter. She wasn't talking back. I said, stepping in. My heart was pounding, but my voice was firm. She was just clarifying something. Let's not make this a scene. Karen turned toward me for a split second. Maybe if you taught your daughter some manners, and then it happened. In one fluid, horrifying moment, she turned back and slapped Ava. Hard. The sound, that awful flat crack, snapped through the courtyard louder than the music, louder than the conversations, louder than my own scream that tore out of my throat before I even knew I was moving. Ava stumbled, one hand flying to her cheek. Her walker tipped slightly, but she caught herself. Her mouth fell open, but no sound came out. Not crying, just shock. Pure, helpless confusion. Every eye was on us now. Gasps, hands over mouths. A child near the swings began to cry. Someone dropped a soda can and it rolled away, fizzing, but no one moved. Karen stood, her hand still slightly raised, breathing heavily. Then, in a voice loud enough to reach the street, she talked back to me. I don't tolerate disrespect, disability, or not. My entire body went cold. I rushed to Ava, dropped to my knees, and pulled her into my arms. Her cheek was red hot. She was trembling, but still not crying. I looked up at Karen, my eyes burning. You laid hands on my daughter, I said through clenched teeth. In front of witnesses. You're done. Karen didn't flinch. I'll speak to the HOA president. This kind of behavior, children meddling, causing problems, it's not acceptable here. I stood up. You're the problem, Karen. And I promise you this isn't going away. For a moment, the entire cookout hovered in that awful, stunned silence. No one said anything. No one came to defend Ava. Not yet. People looked around as if waiting for someone else to act first, as if they couldn't believe what they'd just seen. Then someone stepped forward. It was Dylan's mom. That was assault, she said, voice steady. I saw it. I saw everything. Karen scoffed. It was a disciplinary reaction. She was being rude. She's not your child, the woman replied. And this isn't the 1950s. Another voice spoke up. Then another. I heard it too. She didn't do anything wrong. This is disgusting. The Unity cookout had turned into something else, a reckoning. But not complete. Not yet. Karen stood her ground, still convinced she was in the right. And despite the murmurs, despite the horror, I knew it would take more than this moment for real justice to come. But something had shifted. A veil had been lifted, and nothing about Glenridge Gardens would ever feel the same again. The hours after the slap felt like a dream you couldn't wake from. Not the kind where you're flying or falling, but the kind where your legs won't move and no one can hear you scream. Ava clung to me the rest of the afternoon, silent and pale. She didn't ask questions. She didn't cry. And that terrified me more than anything. I would have given anything to hear her sob or shout, or even demand why someone would hit her. But she just curled into me like she was trying to disappear, and every time I looked into her eyes, all I saw was shame she didn't deserve to carry. We left the cookout quietly. No one tried to stop us. A few neighbors gave us sympathetic glances, but no one said much. One woman mouthed, "I'm sorry." Another man stared down at his cup like it held answers he didn't want to face. I carried Ava's walker in one hand and held her close with the other. We walked home slower than usual. Her little legs dragged, and the bright afternoon sun that had once felt warm now felt intrusive, like a spotlight on a wound no one wanted to acknowledge. That night, after I'd helped Ava into her pajamas and tucked her in, she finally spoke. Her voice was small, barely a whisper. Did I do something wrong? I turned to her, heart cracking. No, sweetheart, you didn't. Not even a little. She looked so angry. Like I was bad. You're not bad, Ava. She is. She paused, eyes on the ceiling. Why would someone hit a kid for talking? I didn't have a good answer. I still don't. I brushed her hair away from her forehead, kissed her, and said, sometimes people are mean because they don't understand kindness, and sometimes they just like to hurt people smaller than them. But what she did was wrong, and we're going to make it right. Ava nodded, but her eyes told me she didn't quite believe it yet. The next morning, I drafted an official complaint to the HOA board. I attached a detailed account of the incident, including names of witnesses who had spoken up at the cookout. I included Ava's version of events and mine. I ended it with one line in bold. If the board takes no action, I will be contacting law enforcement. I sent the email to every single HOA member, including Karen. 2 days passed before I got a response. The reply was cold, clinical, and gutless. Dear resident, thank you for bringing this matter to our attention. The HOA has reviewed the details you submitted. While we do not condone physical confrontation of any kind, we also recognize that misunderstandings can occur during emotionally heightened situations. Karen has served this community for over 7 years without incident. We encourage residents to resolve personal disagreements privately when possible. Regards, Glenridge HOA Board. I read it 3 times before slamming my laptop shut. No incident, no acknowledgement, no action. They had just told me, in the politest way possible, that Ava didn't matter, that a child being slapped in front of witnesses didn't outweigh Karen's tenure or reputation. I wanted to burn the whole neighborhood down. Instead, I printed the email, highlighted every passive-aggressive phrase, and pinned it to our fridge like a battle flag. I wasn't letting this go. Not this time. Later that afternoon, I marched over to the HOA office, a small converted room behind the clubhouse, and knocked hard enough to shake the window pane. Karen opened the door herself, of course. "Can I help you?" she said, like I was a solicitor trying to sell her a magazine subscription. "You can explain to me how assaulting my daughter doesn't qualify as an incident," I said flatly. She didn't flinch. "Your daughter embarrassed me in front of the community." She inserted herself in a discussion meant for adults. She spoke. "That's what she did. And you hit her." Karen sighed. "Children need to know their place, especially ones who have trouble understanding social norms." My hands clenched. "Say it plainly, Karen. Say what you really mean. She doesn't belong here." There it was. Finally, out in the open, the hatred she'd masked under flyers, notes, and tight smiles. "She belongs anywhere love exists," I snapped, "which is more than I can say for you." I left before I did something I'd regret. That night, Ava asked me why the rules didn't work the same for everyone. If I hit someone, she said, "You'd ground me. You always say hands are for helping." I nodded slowly. "That's because they are, Ava. But some people think the rules don't apply to them, and that's when people like us have to speak louder." She thought for a while before whispering, "Can we move again?" That question broke me. I sat beside her on the bed, wrapped my arms around her, and said, "No, we've run too many times. This time we're staying, and we're fighting back." Because for every person like Karen who uses rules as weapons, there's a child like Ava trying to exist peacefully in a world that punishes her for it. And if the HOA wouldn't take a stand, I would, alone if I had to. But I had no idea just how not alone I really was. I didn't sleep much that night. The email from the HOA, the confrontation with Karen, Ava's quiet request to move again. It all looped in my mind like a broken film reel. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Karen's hand rise, Ava's stunned face, the flinch that no child should ever have to learn. I knew now, words wouldn't be enough. Not against someone like her. Not against an HOA board that saw decades of service as more important than a child's safety. I needed proof. I needed people to speak. So I started knocking on doors. At first, it was awkward. Some neighbors were polite, but cautious. "I saw what happened," one said, "but I really don't want to get involved." Another shook her head, eyes wide with fear. Karen's, well, she's always been like that. If I speak out, she'll make our lives hell. It was frustrating, but I understood. Karen's power in the neighborhood wasn't just about her HOA title, it was about fear. She knew how to use the rulebook as a weapon, filing complaints, issuing fines, reminding people about violations no one else cared about. People had learned to stay quiet, to survive. Then, on the third day, I got a message on my phone. "Hi, this is Heather. I live 2 doors down. Can we talk? In private." We met in her backyard behind a tall privacy fence. She looked around before speaking like we were in a spy movie. "I saw the whole thing," she said. "I've been waiting for someone to finally stand up to her." She handed me a small USB flash drive. "This has footage from my Ring camera. It faces the street. It caught the slap clear as day." My hands shook as I took it. "Why didn't you come forward sooner?" Heather sighed. 2 years ago, she reported my teenage son for loitering near the park bench. Said he looked suspicious. He was just waiting for his ride home. After that, we started getting warnings. Noise complaints. Trash bin placement issues. It never stopped. I wanted to speak up this time, but I needed to know I wouldn't be the only one. "You won't be," I promised. I plugged the drive into my laptop the second I got home. And there it was. The whole incident. Ava's gentle correction, Karen's growing fury, and then the slap. The footage caught not just the moment of impact, but the way Karen's face twisted with entitlement afterward. The audio was clear enough to hear her say, "She talked back to me." It was damning. It was perfect. And it wasn't the only thing. Later that evening, a neighbor named Mr. Lin knocked on my door. He was one of the quiet retirees, always tending his roses, never getting involved. I invited him in expecting small talk. "I wanted to apologize," he said, sitting down stiffly. "I should have said something at the cookout. I saw it happen. I just froze. But I've seen her do this before." He went on to describe how last summer Karen had scolded a 9-year-old boy for riding his bike too fast near her house. She grabbed his handlebars, made him fall, said he was a menace. His parents didn't report it because they were renters and didn't want trouble. My stomach turned. One by one, stories started surfacing. A Facebook message, an anonymous email, quiet confessions in grocery store aisles. She'd harassed a new mom for breastfeeding in public, tried to ban a neighbor's autistic son from playing outside because he made strange noises. Every incident small enough to hide behind rules, but all pointing to the same truth. Karen was a bully, a repeat offender, and the HOA had been protecting her all along. Armed with the footage, the testimonies, and the mounting support, I compiled a dossier, yes, a literal folder, and requested an emergency meeting with HOA board. They tried to brush me off at first, citing protocol and review periods. But when I told them the video would be going public, if they didn't act, they changed their tone. The meeting was set for the following Tuesday, but before that day came, another envelope arrived at my door. No name, no return address. Inside was a photocopy of a formal complaint dated 3 years prior, filed against Karen by a former resident. It alleged physical intimidation, verbal abuse, and targeted harassment. The letter had been archived without action. That was the final nail. Karen wasn't just a cruel neighbor. She was a pattern the HOA had ignored. And now, the pattern had a spotlight. The HOA meeting that Tuesday evening was unlike any other. The community room, usually half empty and droning with dull procedural votes, was packed wall to wall, every chair taken. Neighbors stood along the back wall, arms folded, eyes wary but alert. Word had spread about the slap, about the video, about the silence that had enabled it all. For once, people were ready to watch, listen, and maybe finally act. Karen sat in her usual spot at the front, next to the HOA president, still dressed in her stiff beige blouse, her expression unreadable. But this time, there was no clipboard in her lap, no air of control. Just tension. A storm held inside her skin. I stood, when called, handed copies of the incident dossier to each board member, and placed the USB drive on the table. "I want you to watch it," I said calmly. "And I want everyone in this room to see the truth." The board exchanged glances, then connected the drive to the overhead projector. No more denials, no more excuses. The video played in silence. The room watched Karen's hand strike Ava. They heard her words. They saw Ava's small frame flinch, the stunned quiet that followed. Some gasped. A few looked away, but no one spoke until it ended. When the screen went dark, I turned to face the board. "She is 11, disabled, kind, and you protected the person who hurt her. Not just this week, but for years." There was a pause, so deep you could hear the hum of the overhead lights. Then the HOA president cleared his throat, stood, and said, "You're right." His voice trembled slightly. "We failed this family. We failed this community." He turned to Karen. "You are hereby removed from your position on the HOA board, effective immediately. Additionally, you will receive a formal citation for conduct violations, including physical assault, harassment, and creating a hostile environment. You are no longer permitted to attend HOA meetings or represent this community in any capacity." Karen's mouth fell open, but no sound came out. For the first time, she looked small. The board continued. The HOA will also be revising its complaint policies to ensure incidents like this are never dismissed again. And to Ava, on behalf of this community, we apologize. I didn't cry, but Ava did. She was sitting near the back with Dylan, holding the friendship bracelet she'd once been too scared to give him. When she heard those words, "We apologize," her shoulders finally relaxed, and the tears came, quiet but cleansing. Neighbors approached us afterward, some offering hugs, others simply whispering, "I'm sorry." But for once, they weren't just sorry, they were standing. Justice, real and rare, had finally arrived. ChatGPT said. The days that followed felt different, softer somehow. The air seemed lighter, like the weight that had been pressing down on our lives had finally lifted inch by inch. Not everything was perfect, but something had shifted in the community. People smiled more when they passed Ava. They waved with genuine warmth. Some even stopped to ask how she was doing, not with that awkward, tiptoe around the subject tone, but with real concern. And Ava began to shine again. She started walking her evening loops around the block again, this time with her head a little higher. Dylan often joined her, the two of them chatting about bugs and comics, and which fruit snacks were superior. A new family had moved in across the street, a young couple with a golden retriever named Murphy. The dog adored Ava, and she adored him right back. Every afternoon, Murphy would wait by the gate for Ava's walker to click down the sidewalk, his tail wagging like a metronome of pure joy. One morning, while I was making pancakes, Ava came into the kitchen in her pajama shorts, rubbing the sleep from her eyes. "Mom," she said, hesitating for a beat, "can I go outside alone today? Just to the park?" I stopped mid-flip, my heart squeezed not from fear, but from pride. I nodded. She beamed, grabbed her walker, and stepped into the sunlight, like it belonged to her again. I stood by the window and watched as she made her way down the path, slow but steady. Murphy barked in the distance. Dylan waved. The breeze lifted her hair just a little, and for the first time in a long time, Ava looked like a child unafraid of being seen. That slap could have defined her, could have buried her in silence and shame. But instead, it sparked something greater, not just in us, but in our community. It forced people to confront their comfort, to choose sides in a battle they'd ignored for too long. And somehow, in all of it, Ava didn't just survive, she led the healing. Not with anger, not with revenge, but with quiet courage and a strength I don't think even she knew she had. She's still that little girl in the lavender dress who believed in people, even when they failed her. But now, the world around her believes back. There's something deeply unsettling about watching your child suffer, while the world looks the other way. When Karen slapped Ava in front of an entire community, it wasn't just the sting of her hand that hurt, it was the silence that followed. The fear, the hesitation, the way people averted their eyes and waited for someone else to say something. That kind of silence can break a person. It almost broke me. But not Ava. She showed me what real strength looks like, not loud or angry, but steady, unshaken. She kept going, even when people failed her. And when I was ready to pack our bags and disappear again, she reminded me of who I was, her mother, her protector, her voice when hers shook too much to speak. This story isn't just about a slap. It's about power and the people who abuse it. It's about communities that claim to care until doing so becomes uncomfortable. But more than that, it's about reclaiming your place, taking a stand when it's easier to sit, speaking up even when your voice shakes. If you're a parent, if you've ever been dismissed, harassed, or made to feel like your family doesn't belong, you are not alone. Here at the HOA Stories, we share the real, raw, and human experiences that too often go untold. Stories of injustice, of courage, of redemption, and yes, of standing up to the Karens of the world, one truth at a time. So, if this story moved you, made you feel seen, or reminded you of someone you love, subscribe. Share it. Leave a comment. Your voice matters here. Your story deserves to be heard. Because together, we're not just telling stories. We're making sure the world listens. This is the HOA Stories.